Imagine, it's 1948. The world is still recovering from the aftermath of World War II. Nations are rebuilding, lines are being redrawn, and in the midst of this global chaos, a new nation is born. But not through diplomacy or quiet negotiations. No, this birth is forged in fire and conflict. Welcome to the Israeli War of Independence, where every moment was a gamble, every decision a turning point, and the very existence of a nation hung in the balance. In this video, we'll walk you through the dramatic story of Israel's creation. How people scarred by the horrors of the Holocaust fought against all odds to carve out a homeland in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. Hit subscribe and let's dive straight into the video. Before the clash of ideologies and the rise of a new state, the land we now call Israel was already steeped in a complex history and conflict. Thousands of years ago, this land was known as Canaan, a place where ancient tribes roamed and worshipped. According to the Hebrew Bible, it was here that Abraham first set foot, guided by divine promise. His descendants, it is said, were enslaved in Egypt for centuries before finally returning to this sacred ground. Fast forward to the days of King David, who united the tribes and made Jerusalem his capital, and then his son Solomon, who built the first temple, a spiritual centerpiece that would become the heart of this ancient land. And let's be honest, it's pretty amazing that through invasions, exiles, and endless conflicts, the people of this land held on to their stories and their faith. Each chapter of Israel's history, from ancient kingdoms to foreign conquests, is a testament to resilience and hope. And it's this very spirit, forged in both faith and fire, that would come roaring back in 1948, as a new chapter began in a land with a very old story. From 1517 to 1917, Israel was part of the Ottoman Empire, a vast region that spanned much of the Middle East. But as World War I tore through Europe and beyond, the political map of the world was being redrawn faster than you could say Treaty of Versailles. At this critical moment in 1917, Arthur James Balfour, the then British Foreign Secretary, wrote a letter that would change the course of Middle Eastern history, the Balfour Declaration. In this letter, the British government expressed its support for the creation of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, hoping to gain support for the Allies during the war and perhaps secure a strategic advantage in the region. When World War I ended in 1918, with an Allied victory, the once powerful Ottoman Empire collapsed, and Britain took control of Palestine, an area that included modern-day Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. In 1922, the League of Nations officially approved the British mandate over Palestine, giving the green light to the Balfour Declaration. But not everyone was happy. Many Arabs in the region saw the idea of a Jewish homeland as a threat to their own future and feared it would lead to their displacement. The Balfour Declaration wasn't just a letter, it was a promise that sparked tensions and set the stage for future conflicts. When we think of World War II, we often recall battles, generals, and nations at war. But beyond the front lines, a darker, more sinister chapter was written, a chapter that would forever change the Jewish people and the course of human history. Starting in late 1941, the Nazis began the systematic deportation of Jews from ghettos in Poland to concentration camps. The first to be targeted were those deemed least useful: the sick, the elderly, the weak, and the very young. The Nazis' plan for annihilation moved with chilling efficiency. In March 1942, the first mass gassings began, and soon after 5 more mass killing centers were established in occupied Poland. From 1942 to 1945, Jews were transported to these camps from across Europe. These were not just places of imprisonment, no, they were factories of death. During the summer and fall of 1942 alone, over 300,000 Jews were deported from the Warsaw Ghetto to these death camps. For the Jewish people, World War II wasn't just a battle for territory or power, it was a fight for survival. The Holocaust claimed the lives of 6 million Jews, leaving behind a scar that would never fully heal. Out of this unimaginable horror came a renewed determination among the survivors in the global Jewish community, a determination to create a safe and sovereign homeland where such atrocities could never happen again. This desire for a place of refuge would become a driving force in the movement for the creation of the State of Israel, a homeland born from the ashes of the Holocaust, where the Jewish people could reclaim their dignity, safety, and self-determination. After World War II, many Jews, now homeless and traumatized by the horrors of the concentration camps, sought refuge in Palestine. But it wasn't that simple. The British, who controlled the region at the time, restricted Jewish immigration, often sending those who attempted to reach Palestine back or detaining them in camps. With tensions escalating and violence breaking out between Jewish and Arab communities, the British, overwhelmed and exhausted, decided to hand the issue over to the newly formed United Nations. In 1947, the UN proposed Resolution 181, a plan to divide Palestine into two separate states, one Jewish and one Arab, while establishing a special international status for the city of Jerusalem. The proposed Jewish state would receive about 56% of the land, which included areas with a significant Jewish population, though it would not have control over Jerusalem. The Jewish community, eager for a homeland, accepted the plan. But for many Arabs, the idea of a Jewish state on what they considered their land was unacceptable, leading them to reject the proposal outright. Despite the rejection from much of the Arab populace, on May 14, 1948, the Jewish leaders, under the guidance of David Ben-Gurion, declared the establishment of the State of Israel. It was a historic moment, a victory for a people who had endured centuries of persecution and recent unimaginable horrors. The birth of Israel was a beacon of hope for Jews everywhere, a place where they could finally have security and sovereignty. Yet, it was also the start of a new and enduring conflict in the region as the fight for the land intensified and the battle lines were drawn. Israel's Declaration of Independence on May 14, 1948, was a momentous event, quickly gaining recognition from major world powers like the United States and the Soviet Union. But this dream came under immediate threat. Within hours, 5 Arab states, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Transjordan, now Jordan, launched a coordinated invasion determined to crush the state before it could fully establish itself. Outnumbered and facing formidable opposition, the newly formed Israeli Defense Forces faced a daunting task. The Arab armies were larger, but many of their units were poorly trained and lacked coordination. In the critical first month of fighting, small but determined Israeli forces managed to hold off the invaders, preventing Egyptian, Iraqi, and Jordanian troops from reaching Tel Aviv and isolating Jerusalem from the rest of the country. As the conflict raged, a fragile UN-brokered ceasefire in June gave the exhausted Israeli forces a much-needed breather. During this brief pause, Israel rearmed and reorganized, often relying on secret sources for weapons and supplies. By early July, hostilities resumed with fierce intensity. Israeli forces launched counterattacks, successfully pushing back Egyptian and Iraqi troops, threatening the southern and central parts of the coastal plain. However, the war came at a high cost. The 1948 war, also known as Israel's War of Independence, was the young nation's bloodiest conflict, where over 6,000 Israelis were killed and 30,000 were wounded out of a population of just 780,000. For Israel, this war was not just a fight for territory, it was a battle for survival, for the very right to exist as a nation. Just as the dust began to settle from Israel's War of Independence, tensions flared up again with the rise of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, a fierce Arab nationalist. In 1956, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a crucial waterway that connected Europe and Asia and was largely controlled by British and French interests. This move set off alarm bells in London and Paris, as the canal was vital for international trade and their economic interests. To make matters worse, Egypt also blocked Israeli ships from using the canal and closed off the southern port of Eilat. France and Britain, worried about their interests and security, they quickly struck a deal with Israel. The plan was bold. Israel would invade Egypt, giving France and Britain an excuse to step in and seize control of the canal. In October 1956, Israel launched its invasion of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. Within just 5 days, the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, had captured key locations including Gaza, Rafah, and Al-Arish, taking thousands of Egyptian soldiers prisoner and securing most of the Sinai Peninsula up to the Suez Canal. With these swift victories, Israel also opened up sea routes through the Gulf of Aqaba, which Egypt had previously blocked. From June 5th to June 10th, Arab and Israeli forces clashed in a conflict that would later be known as the SixDay War. The tension had been building for months, with Syria intensifying its attacks on Israeli villages from their positions in the Golan Heights. In response, the Israeli Air Force shot down 6 Syrian MiG fighter jets, escalating the situation further. Sensing a storm on the horizon, Egypt President Nasser mobilized his troops near the Sinai border, expelled the UN peacekeeping force, and once again blocked the port of Eilat. The stage was set for a major showdown. In May of 1967, Egypt took another bold step by signing a mutual defense pact with Jordan, signaling a united front against Israel. With the Arab nations appearing to gear up for war, Israel decided to take preemptive action. On June 5th, Israel launched a surprise air assault that decimated Egypt's air force while it was still on the ground. This sudden strike gave Israel a significant advantage, and what followed was a series of rapid, decisive victories. In just 6 days, Israel forces managed to push back the Syrian army from the Golan Heights, seize control of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and drive Jordanian forces out of the West Bank. Most significantly, Israel gained control over the entire city of Jerusalem, a city with historical and religious significance for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. As the 20th century turned into the 21st, the conflict between Israel and its Arab neighbors shifted in nature. Initially, major confrontations were driven by larger regional actors or occurred on foreign soil. However, after Hamas, a militant Palestinian group, took control of the Gaza Strip in 2007, the focus of the conflict turned inward. Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade on Gaza, leading to a series of intense and deadly confrontations between Israel and Hamas in 2008, 2012, 2014, and 2021. These conflicts, while devastating, were largely contained within the borders of Gaza. But on October 7, 2023, the violence took a dramatic and deadly turn. Hamas launched the most brutal assault on Israel since its independence. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu responded by declaring a state of war and vowing to dismantle Hamas with the full might of the Israeli Defense Forces. The weeks that followed saw relentless Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, resulting in severe destruction and a massive humanitarian crisis. By the time Israel launched its ground invasion at the end of October, over half of Gaza's population had been displaced, and the conflict had become the deadliest for Palestinians since the 1948 war. Despite efforts by mediators like Qatar and Egypt to negotiate a ceasefire and secure the release of hostages, the fighting continued, with significant damage to Gaza and escalating confrontations involving Hezbollah and the Houthi movement. By the end of the war, by the end of the year, Israel faced growing international pressure to scale back its military actions, and even its strongest ally, the United States, began to show signs of discord. As the conflict drags on, many voices in the international community advocate for a two-state solution as the only path to peace. a solution that envisions a secure Israel alongside a sovereign Palestinian state. Yet this solution is out of reach, with no clear timeline for implementation. As both sides suffer the heavy cost of this ongoing conflict, the big question is, when, if ever, will the fighting end, and will peace finally come to this troubled region? So if you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Check out all our other videos for more exciting stories that'll keep you coming back for more. See you in the next one, and as always, keep exploring and stay curious. Thanks for watching.